A.W. Tozer once wrote, "What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. We tend, by a secret law of the soul, to move toward our mental image of God." Okay, but you might have noticed this. People have wildly different ideas about what God is like. So how do you know if your picture of God is in any way a true likeness? This is one of the core dilemmas Jesus was sent to solve. He's uniquely authorized to paint an accurate portrait. You might say that Jesus himself is God's defining self-portrait. What comes to Jesus' mind when he thinks about God is captured by his most famous story. There once was a father who had 2 sons. One day, the younger son demands his inheritance and then takes the money and leaves. Why would he do this? Jesus doesn't say. Maybe because different people have different reasons. Maybe the kid's a rebel who doesn't like living by other people's rules or expectations, so he goes off to find himself and chases bliss without his father hovering around making him feel itchy. Or maybe the son grew up understanding that being a member of this family meant being good. His overachieving brother made it look easy, but he just seems to screw things up. So he leaves to escape the feeling of being a fraud and hypocrite. Whatever his reasons for splitting, the first surprise in the story is the father's response. The father doesn't lay the guilt on thick or rage at his defiance. He doesn't say, "Well, I can't stop you from going, but you're not getting a cent of my money." The father gives him what he asked for. He pours gifts into his son's hands, even as he's walking out the door. This is strange behavior, almost scandalous generosity. But the son doesn't register that. He takes the money as his due, moves far away, and proceeds with living his best life. And everything is great for a while. Then the storm hits, all the bills come due, and the money runs out. At the same time, a famine arrives, the ancient version of a recession. It's a classic combination. Our choices catch up with us suddenly in unexpected ways. The habit becomes an addiction. The lies get exposed, the debt gets called in, and also our circumstances change in ways beyond our control. We get sick, or the economy sours, or a forest fire strikes. We're swept up in a current, look around, and find we're alone without a harness. Or maybe none of that happens, and we just wake up one day and realize we're surrounded by strangers, hungry in a way that nothing seems to fill, living a life that means nothing to us. The younger son is drowning, and he discovers that no one he's hung out with really cares if he lives or dies. He finds himself lying awake at night, dreaming of it at his father's house. What stands out now from a distance isn't the restrictions that used to chafe, but the abundance, the safety and belonging. Eventually, the loneliness and desperation grow more unbearable than the shame. The son finally decides to risk throwing himself on his father's mercy. He spends the journey home practicing his speech. He'll get on his knees and grovel. He'll make it clear he doesn't expect to reclaim his place as a favored son. All he's asking for is a bunk with the hired hands. As he approaches the outskirts of his hometown, his heart is pounding. He can barely feel his feet. All this long, Jesus' story has been told from the son's perspective, from the perspective of anyone burdened by shame and regret. But now the point of view shifts, and Jesus says, "Let me tell you what your father was doing while you were away." Every day for all those years his son was gone, the father walked to the end of the road and stared off into the distance, longing, hoping against hope. And then one day, after thousands of mornings, it happens. He spots a tiny figure on the horizon. It's barely a speck, but this father would know his son anywhere. The son is too busy staring at his feet and practicing his apologies to notice his father yet. But the father pulls up the hem of his robes, and he runs for his son like he's never run before in his life. The son hears his name being shouted over and over again, and he looks up wide-eyed to see his father barreling toward him, beaming and with tears streaming down his face. Before he can get a word of his speech out, his father's arms come around him, squeezing him so tight. He keeps saying over and over, "My son, my son, my son." The son starts making his apologies, but before he can even get to his proposal about the bunkhouse, the father interrupts him, shouting to the neighbors drawn by the commotion. Someone fire up the grill. Everyone head to my place. We're having steak. We're emptying the wine cellar. We're partying all night. Because my son, my heir, was dead and he's come back to life. This is what comes to Jesus' mind when he thinks about God. And he's in a better position to know than anyone. Any other claim about God must be measured by this one. If this is God, why would anyone wait for another minute to turn home? Let's hear the story in Jesus' own words in Luke 15, beginning in verse 11. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." So the father agreed to divide up his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding to the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am, dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me back as a hired servant.'" So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son." But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now is found." And so the party began. I'm Meghan Good, and this has been Reading Jesus. Thanks so much for joining me for a few minutes in Luke, and I'll see you next time.